Participants from here or no?
No, we cannot see participants,
Okay.
but if they make comments, we can see those.
Gotcha.
If they post Facebook comments. So,
Okay.
all right. So we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Welcome to Stories at Sundown. I'm Mac McCullough from Willard Library, your host, broadcasting live from Burley Corners in northern Penfield Township. and my guest today is Dr. Elishae Johnson. Elishae, there's a bio over here that I wrote for you. You're the founder and CEO of Eudemonia. So how do you say that?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. All right. Eudemonia Counseling Service. We'll want to hear about that. But you've been with Bronson Healthcare Group for quite a while.
I have.
I think, and I was hesitant to write down your title because I think it might have changed. I don't know. But you're a longtime Battle Creek therapist.
Absolutely.
You're a Battle Creek native.
Yes.
And you have an amazing story. And, you and I have intersected many times over the years, but we've never actually sat down and have a conversation.
You're right. Like this would be the first time that we've sat down to talk.
Yeah. So cool. Welcome.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I always like to start these things with just learning a little bit about yourself. And, your work is so vital in the community. And
thank you.
And to talk about how you were attracted to it. And I know a little bit about that because I read a story that Carlo Pizzoli wrote for the Enquirer a few years ago. Yeah. But go ahead and tell your story.
Well, thank you. It is interesting how I ended up here because I did everything I could to actually fight what I've learned to end up being my calling, right? And I wouldn't take it back. But so like you said, a Battle Creek native, born and raised here. And so when I was young, and I think a lot of parents do this, right? We steer our kids in a particular direction, right? Like we want, I can envision you being this or that, right? And so my parents really wanted a lawyer in the family. So I was kind of, growing up with the understanding that I'm going to be a lawyer one day when I grow up. And then I thought, well, I kind of want to go into medicine. And I thought I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. And I have no idea, like, who even knows what an anesthesiologist is when you're in the 6th grade? So I have no clue, like, where that even came from. And now, as I've come to know myself, know that totally would not fit as much as I like to talk to people. Working with sweet people just would not have been, So anyway, once I got into high school and I had taken several career tests and everything sort of pointed to like this, you're great with people, you have influence and passion and empathy and, but you feel like, but I want to do something else. Like I want to go into business and I want to be in one of those kinds of fields. Right. Yeah. So I kept pushing it. I went to U of M. So the wonderful maize and blue. I'm a Wolverine, went to University of Michigan. I really wasn't sure still what I wanted to do, but I thought I wanted to go into business school. Yeah. And so I started out kind of taking classes thinking I was going to do that. Once I learned more about it, I was like, I don't think that's what I want to do. So I majored in communication studies with a hope to go into broadcasting or radio or something like that. And then, the program ended. I finished in 3 years and I really didn't have clear direction. So I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, went back to, what I was socialized to be. I started out at the University of Detroit Mercy, and literally a week into the program, like it was clear. And I'm a gut check person, so like my gut works really well. I'm really in tune and self-aware, and I could just feel it wasn't it. Right? I'm like, this is not it. Right? And I was already kind of struggling and going, and so I just said, I'm not going to spend years into something that is not working for me. So I dropped out. I dropped out of law school within that first month, and decided to take a year off to like figure out what I wanted to do when I grow up.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of worked a job here and there. I worked at the Lady Foot Locker. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. In my interview, and this is with Spring Arbor, in my interview, so my intention was to go into organizational development, still trying to do something else. In the interview, the woman says to me, I'm sorry, I have to stop this interview because God is talking to me and I'm feeling like you are called to go into counseling. And I'm like, you know what, God, I'm done fighting. I'm done fighting, right? Like I keep trying to do something else and this is obviously what you called me to do. So I dropped that idea, went into the counseling program. A week into that program, I got into a really serious car accident. So I had a crushed chest, punctured lung, 9 broken ribs. I lost my left eye from the glass, so I have a prosthetic eye. And so that was like a critical point in my life. Probably one of the hardest things that I had gone through.
Yeah.
And I remember the first thing I said when I woke up, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't get that paper done. Like, who does that? Talk about ambitious, right?
Yeah.
But so that's kind of like how I entered the field, right? I got right back in once I was able and healthy as I could be to get back in the program. And I had a wonderful support system at Spring Arbor. And the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and for me, it raises a lot of questions.
Yes.
2 questions. I mean, those lines of work that you were pursuing before, at least at certain levels, seem like nothing like what you're doing, what you ended up doing.
Right.
And then the other thing is, you strike me, you say ambitious, so I'll use that word.
Yeah.
The decision to quit something that you committed to, that seems to me to be antithetical to who you are, probably what you've been taught.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is that it makes it a real brave move.
You are absolutely, that is probably the first point in my life where I realized, even though I don't know that I had the language for it that I do now, value-based living. That is the first point in my life where I realized that, you have to know what's important to you and you need to align your life with what is important to you.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people live a long time before they learn that.
True story. It's an ongoing thing, right? I mean, like it's certainly something you don't really arrive at. You just kind of have to keep checking your tires and.
So there you got a fan right there.
Hi, Leah. I love her.
Me too. I work with Leah at the ARC. I'm on the board there. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we're on the board for the chamber.
Yeah, exactly. And you've been on a lot of boards in town too.
For sure.
Are you still on some boards?
Yes, always, right. Vice chair for the Battle Creek Community Foundation. I'm on the board for the Urban League. I'm on the board for the Battle Creek Chamber of Commerce, the board for RISE. I know I'm missing something. That was my neighbor, Lauren. Hi, Lauren.
Yeah, that's a fun feature of this that people can chime in. People see it. So, and so another question I wanted to ask. I'd read about your car accident, years ago when Carmel did that story, and I'm curious. I was in a very serious car accident myself, a fatal car accident. I was not seriously hurt as you were, but it definitely left a mark, and I mean that psychologically, emotionally.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering how that informs you, and how you. What's that done for your outlook, your empathy, your sense of what people are going through?
You know what? It is a shift. It makes every moment important. Every single moment important, right? I don't take anything for granted. And when I find myself going there, right? Like as I start to, we all find ourselves kind of like, and not that our problems are insignificant, right? But, sometimes we find ourselves in a space and we're like, oh, I'm so mad that I have to work from home, right? This is like kind of a good problem to have, right? So I try not to take any moment for granted. It has certainly shifted that. It has definitely increased my resilience. I don't think I knew how strong I was until then. And having to face so many challenges. And to be honest, Mac, like I was broke. After that car accident, I was broke, right? And so not being able to work and having to wait on insurance to figure it out. My family having to take care of me. My dad lost his job during that period because, I needed care. And there was just so much that was going on that I have just learned to be appreciative and, learn to shift perspective on things that are hard.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do any, a lot of people who are coming on here will know you and know what you do, but HelpNet, we have HelpNet scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So talk a little bit about what HelpNet does for the community and what you do there. And please.
Perfect. So my title is System Director of Business Health Services, but what I do, right? I'm a director, but I am very much, I'm probably not like a lot of directors. So I'm very hands-on. I still see clients. I love therapy. I love people. So my heart is there. My heart is seeing people live their best lives and live according to their own standards. I love that part of therapy. So by training, I'm a therapist, but I oversee HelpNet operations as well as sexual assault services. So, and I call my leadership the SAS supportive leadership because they have an awesome manager, Danielle. She takes care of everything. So I'm like really there to just support her. So HelpNet is an employee assistance program. We work with organizations to focus on organizational health. So we provide mental health services to employees and their household family members. And that's a literal household family members. Doesn't matter if they're dependents or if Uncle Joe lives in the house, he's eligible as well. But our focus really is on improving organizational health. And we understand that when your employees are healthy, right, the organization is healthy. Yeah. And so focusing on people and wellness and mental health support, and I'm genuinely saying this, we have some of the best staff ever. My staff are so invested in their work. They're passionate about what they do. They love mental health. They're community centered. Some of them in Kalamazoo or wherever they live, all of them are invested in the community in some way. We have a special focus on equity. We're under the Community Health, Equity, and Inclusion leadership structure. So Beth Washington is my supervisor. She's amazing. I love what I do. So we contract with companies to provide these services.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And you're also a therapist, I believe. Yes. With another provider in town.
Well, I've worked at a couple different agencies. Right now, though, on the side, I have Eudemonia. So that is my practice that I own. But I used to work for psychological consultants. Is that what you're thinking of?
I was,
yes. Yeah, and life coach psychology. So I have worked at various places in the community. And then I started my own.
Yeah. So, I'm trying. We didn't put Eudemonia up on our banner. How do you spell that?
It's EUDEMONIA.
And that's a website, eudemonia.com or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. EudemoniaPLLC.com.
I'm putting that up there for our LLC.com. So I'm going to go ahead and put that up there so people can see it.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So it's a virtual so relevant right now. Yes.
Oh, man. I'm telling you. Somebody asked me earlier today, they said, oh, my gosh, I bet you guys are like overwhelmed. But, I will say this, even though we are overwhelmed, it's long overdue. I think for a long time, we have not paid enough attention to mental health. We like to separate mental health from any other types of health, which is interesting because the body doesn't do that, right? The body doesn't say, oh, this is your mental health and this is your physical health. Health is health, right? And so, I tell people, think about a time that you visited your practitioner for something. Did you ever not have an emotional response to that? Like ever? No, absolutely. So it's important that we don't distinguish that as something different. So we are appreciating that people are focusing on mental health. This pandemic is like just as much as an anxiety pandemic as it is anything else. So Eudemonia is a mental health practice. So I provide and providers as well. We provide counseling services. So we're a virtual and outreach practice. Also do like education, seminars and trainings, presentations. So yes, thank you for asking.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious about, the interactive, the virtual experience.
Yes.
Do you find that the connection that you make with your clients, your patients, is as rich as it is in person?
It is. And I think it also depends on the individual and how comfortable they are in the virtual space. But what I will say is, it does give you a different connection to your clients when you can see them in their natural environment, right? So in the office, there still is this element of guardedness, or we're just not, we may not necessarily be as vulnerable as I can see, you sitting in your living room. Right?
Yeah.
It's a different thing. And so I have found that it allows people to kind of like take off that extra layer. And you're in it. And I appreciate it. Like, I know some people like, oh, the distractions. And most folks are careful about their distractions, but occasionally you'll have a person who, my kids in the background and they're just running back and forth. It's life, right? And so it gives us a peek into the lives of our clients, I think, a little bit differently than before. So I appreciate the virtual space. And I also like meeting people where they are. It's just hard now to all the things that we have to balance to come into an office and I gotta find a center and is it okay if my kid's in the lobby while we meet? It's different. So there are lots of things to appreciate about it.
Yeah, well, it can be really intimidating to go into a practice, whether it's medical, psychiatry, or psychology, or whatever it is. It's intimidating. And I think we've come a long way in our society about getting rid of some of the stigma around asking for support. But it's still there.
It is.
We're still socialized to tough through it. Get through it.
Like get through it. It's not a big deal. But I will say that generations, right? That newer generations are changing that. Yeah. It's like a dinner table conversation. Oh, I went to see my therapist today, right? Like, do you have a therapist? So it's like almost becoming a thing to have a therapist. Yeah. So I think that is changing, but you're right. There is some stigma, especially in the way that we talk about mental health.
Yeah.
Right. And we got to get rid of that kind of like that shame. And, that's why I love Brene Brown, right? She talks a lot about the power of being vulnerable and risking that and just acknowledging that we all struggle, right? And we all need a little help. Even the therapist needs a therapist.
Absolutely. We all could use it. And do you get the sense, this has been so disruptive.
It has.
This time that we're living through. And things seem so uncertain, and things are getting really dark right now, with the recent cases. Are you finding that people are more willing to turn to that, to turn to someone like yourself, or to look for practices that help them, get through?
Help through stuff. Yeah. Yes, referrals have definitely increased. All over, right? But the complexity of them, we talk amongst therapists about how our cases just look different than what they used to look. When I have 10-year-olds and, kids who are coming in for political distress, when I was 10, I don't know that I even knew what the president did.
Yeah.
I can name who the president was, but so we're seeing the complexity of issues kind of like increasing. So things are a little more intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that we've made it more comfortable for folks to say, I need some additional support.
Yeah. I want to read a quote actually, I picked this up out of the Shopper.
Yeah.
And I think it was an ad that you were a part of.
Yeah.
And I just love this quote, and I just want to read it and then have you
Sure.
respond to it. You already have what you need. We are resilient, resourceful, and ingenious. Hope is good for the soul. I also recognize that for some, hope is buried beneath trauma, heartache, anxiety, depression, and despair.
Yeah.
And I really cued in on the trauma.
Yes.
And I just wanted to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yes. So, one of the things that I think is important for people, at least from the work that I do, that I don't, as a therapist, come in giving you something that you don't already have. Okay. So I think it's important for people to know we usually already have what we need. We either need permission to use it. We need somebody to help dust it off a little bit, right? So that you can discover that you already have what you need, or teach you or help you kind of like tap into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So when clients come in like, oh my gosh, you have done so much for me. It's like, no, you have already done so much for you. Like my role is to help uncover some of the things that are like barriers to you tapping into that.
Yeah.
But also realizing that, even though there's a sliver of hope in there, it's sometimes hard to get to that when you have trauma and grief and distress and, isolate. I mean, there's a lot of layers. And so sometimes we like over talk about like positivity, just be positive. But really what that teaches us is don't have negative emotions. And that's not helpful to us. Right. I just did a presentation earlier today to our Bronson leaders talking about like, it's really about changing your relationship with your feelings. Like allow those feelings to teach you something about yourself. If I feel guilty about something, what is that saying about what I care about? Right. And that was actually I want to say that was emotional agility. It was either that or the power of vulnerability. I can't remember which one, but allow guilt to tell you what you care about. Right. And I'm more worried about people who don't feel guilty than people who do. For people who never feel guilt, I'm like, oh, right. Like that's a concern. But, changing our relationship with our feelings so that we are comfortable with all of our emotions.
Yeah. Actually, it's Brene Brown, who also a book that you mentioned and you just mentioned. Yes. She does a very good job of explaining the difference between guilt and shame.
Yes. Yes.
Guilt is, guilt. Shame is, guilt is over a mistake. Shame is that you are a mistake.
Yes. Right. So guilt is I did something bad, and shame is I am bad.
Exactly.
Yes. So I love Brene Brown. She is. One day I want to meet her. Really, I absolutely love her and how she uses her own stories of shame to help us, right, and to educate us.
Yeah, and Aaliyah.
Yes,
growth doesn't come from a comfort zone.
Yes, amen. Right. Nothing comes from a comfort zone, right? We got to step out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that all the emerging research, and we say emerging, the frustrating thing for me is that we've known more and more about what trauma does to the body physiologically for a very long time. And it's very difficult to get it embedded in practices, medical, educational, police, whatever the case might be. And that's what you're really talking about. And that relationship is understanding where that voice in your head is coming from and looking at it not with judgment, but with understanding, right?
Yes. Acceptance and curiosity. If we looked at our thoughts, sometimes you have to imagine you externally, like in like a third person perspective, right? Like, and imagine that you are having a conversation with you. And most of the time when you do that, you have a totally, because the things that we say to ourselves, like the thoughts that we have, are so disrespectful and unkind, right? And so if you imagine you taking yourself out of yourself and speaking to yourself the way you have those thoughts, it usually almost always changes things.
Yeah, yeah, and to really understand that inner voice, I mean, it's so primal, and it's designed. It's so you learn these behaviors very, very young. I need to do this to be safe,
to survive, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so you just carry that with you. But then all the cortisol and adrenaline and stuff that's just triggered whenever you're triggered, that has very bad health effects, not just on your behavior and mood, but physiologically as well.
Yeah, the brain learns, right? I mean, like it learns. And so sometimes we have to appreciate that when we're in that space, that at one point it was for survival, right? And that it was good to us then. And then remind ourselves that we don't need it anymore, right? Like I'm not in that situation. It was helpful to me then. And I don't need that. It doesn't serve me now, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you mentioned one book, and I have this one. I don't have the other ones that you mentioned.
Yes.
What do you like about this?
So I love how she talks about changing your relationships with your emotions. I love her discussions about toxic positivity, right? Like, the idea of just be positive, right? And that it really dismisses our uncomfortable emotions and how we can use our uncomfortable emotions to tell us a story about ourselves or what's important to us. I'm looking at some of the things that I made notes about, the things that I love about this book. I love when she talks about the fixed mindset versus growth mindsets. So, and this one was hard for me to wrap my head around. So she gave an example about, like, let's say you have a child who got an A on an exam and you say, you're a genius, right? How that really is fixed mindset versus saying to your child, you study so hard for that exam, which is growth mindset, right? Because when you say you're a genius, you sort of give the impression that, you did it because you're smart and there's nowhere else to go, right? Like there's nowhere else to go with that. Whereas when you say you studied hard, right, it embraces and encourages growth. So I was like, man, I never thought about that way. I've heard of fixed versus growth mindset, but the way she explained that was different, and it also makes sense.
Yeah.
And then she mentions that having to versus wanting to, and how we want to come from a place of wanting to rather than have to. So if you want to lose weight, if you're coming from the place of, I gotta lose weight, because you're shaming yourself, versus I want to lose weight because I want to be healthy, how that can impact our behaviors.
Yeah. That's powerful. I do want to read the book, but instead, after I agreed, after you agreed to be on the show, I was actually at a meeting in which Kathy Wilson put up a video of Emily and Amelia Nagoski, who are the co-authors of this book, Burnout.
Yes, I got to read that one.
The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And it just moved me to go out and get the book. And maybe I should have picked up on this because it was at the XOXO festival. But when I started reading, I was like, oh, this is for women. And it was written, toward women, a female audience. But, I really got a lot out of it. And I would recommend to read it because I told Kathy, I said, for me, it was like a twofer. One, it was helping me understand the stress cycle. Two, it also helped me see more deeply what it's like to be a woman living in a patriarchy and a system where you're constantly devalued, your looks are judged, things like that, and what that does to your sense of worth. So it was a twofer, but the the cool thing about this book is how they explained how the difference between the stressor and the stress. You often can't do anything about the stressor, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
But you can recognize how your body processes stress.
Yes.
Very close to that trauma-based training.
Oh, I love that.
Before. Yep. I got a quote here, and it kind of, the good news is stress is I'm sorry. The good news is that stress is not the problem. The problem is the strategies that deal with stressors have almost no relationship to the strategies that deal with the psychological reactions our bodies have to those stressors.
Wow.
Well, is not to live in a state of perpetual safety and calm, but to move fluidly from a state of adversity, risk, adventure, or excitement back to safety, calm, and out again. Stress is not bad for you. Being stuck is bad for you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And it's just chock full of strategies that you can employ, practices that you can adopt to really help your body learn to cope. And there's some personal stories there about some breakdowns and the discovery to that. Mm-hmm. But it's just, and the cool thing about the book is that it's so accessible and yes. Conversational and relational and all.
I love those kind of reads. Like, yeah. I like to read and not know that I'm reading. Like I'm enjoying it. And lately, I've been doing more ebooks. But
yeah. Well, I actually listened to this book. My strategy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I meant. The audiobooks. Yeah.
My strategy with this show, because it's every week, and I try to read what my guests are reading or read about the same things. I would never have the time to read a book or two books every week. So I was
going to say, how many books do you read a week? That was going to be my question for you.
Well, usually just one, sometimes more than one. But you listen to this book and, they're just a hoot. I mean, they're hilarious. Yeah. So, I mean,
yes, I'm going to have to get that.
Yeah, it's entertaining. And another thing about the book that I think that its readers will really appreciate is understanding the difference between happiness and joy.
Ooh.
Joy. And they quote a woman whom I have not read before. Her name is, I'm going to forget her name. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I forget her name. That happens on live television sometimes. But really that understanding that happiness is so circumstantial.
Yes.
But joy is it's not as ephemeral, right? And it's tied to having a sense of purpose, which kind of gets back to what you were talking about when you were searching, right? You found that. And that's the thing that keeps you moving, right?
It is. Happiness is a state, like, and it fluctuates too much for us to depend on it. Right?
Yeah.
But I love that joy is really an experience. Yeah.
And then you got Tristan here. Says hi.
Hi, Tristan. Oh yeah, that's my coffee guy.
Yeah, mine too. So, yeah, and two great books. Brene Brown. Anything you pick up by Brene Brown is good.
Yes,
and she's a great narrator of her own books as well. If you like to listen to books.
Well, what I like about her audiobooks is, at least for this one, she doesn't like read it word for word. It's like she's presenting to a show to an audience. At least for the power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And it's like so easy to follow,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just put up that title. So if our watchers want to write it down, they can. And then did I put up power of vulnerability before? There it is.
Perfect.
So, well, this has been so much fun. I told you.
Yes. It did.
But I'm so glad that you could come on, and I'm glad we got to finally sit down and have like a real conversation as opposed to saying, hi, how you doing?
I'm glad you invited me. Really, thank you.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it. So
thank you.
Thank you so much, and we'll do it again sometime.
Perfect. Will do. Thank you, Mac. Goodbye.
And everybody, we have next week, Jeremy Andrews is joining me, so that should be a fun show.
Oh, that'll be fun.
One of the things I've read, and I have to pick up something else because he has a whole list of things that he wanted to talk about. But I read Jack Kerouac, The Road, in preparation. Jeremy's canceled on me twice now, so I'm putting the pressure on now. He's got to be. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.